Autumn Cordellionè's lawsuit against Donald Trump, a legal and social analysis. Autumn Cordellionè, a transgender inmate, has filed a $3.5 million lawsuit against former President Donald Trump. The suit, filed in the Southern District of Indiana, alleges that Trump's transphobic hate speech incited sexual assaults against her while incarcerated. Cordellionè is currently serving a 55-year sentence for the 2001 killing of her stepdaughter. The handwritten lawsuit claims a direct link between Trump's rhetoric and the violence she experienced. This case raises complex questions about the responsibility of public figures for the actions of others. It also highlights the vulnerability of transgender individuals within the prison system. Give a like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Cordellionè argues that Trump's statements on gender identity created an environment that emboldened her attackers. She specifically cites Trump's efforts to define sex based on biological terms as fueling the assaults. The lawsuit claims the attacks occurred shortly after her transfer from protective custody. According to Cordellionè, her attackers referenced Trump during the assaults. They allegedly believed Trump's policies would shield them from any repercussions for their actions. Cordellionè seeks $3.5 million in damages, holding Trump negligent due his alleged knowledge that others may act on his words. The core of Cordellionè's argument rests on the assertion that Trump's words directly incited violence. Establishing this causal link will be a significant challenge in the legal proceedings. The lawsuit also raises questions about the limits of free speech and the potential for incitement. The lawsuit details instances of stabbing and sexual assault allegedly perpetrated by gang-affiliated inmates. These assaults reportedly occurred over a 4-day period in late January. Cordellionè claims her attackers explicitly stated Trump's support for their actions. Court documents outline Cordellionè's account of the attacks. She alleges that gang-affiliated inmates stabbed and sexually assaulted her repeatedly. The graphic details of these alleged assaults underscore the severity of the situation. The specific nature of the assaults and the alleged statements made by the attackers are crucial to Cordellionè's case. These details will be subject to intense scrutiny and investigation. The veracity of these claims will be a key factor in determining the outcome of the lawsuit. In addition to Trump, the lawsuit also names prison employees. Cordellionè alleges that these employees dismissed her claims of sexual assault. She further claims they refused to provide adequate protection, leaving her vulnerable to further attacks. Cordellionè asserts that staff members made disparaging comments about taxpayer money being spent on her care. She argues that these actions and omissions constitute a violation of her Eighth Amendment rights. The Eighth Amendment protects prisoners from cruel and unusual punishment. The allegations against prison employees raise serious concerns about the treatment of transgender inmates. They also highlight the potential for systemic failures in protecting vulnerable individuals within the prison system. These claims will likely trigger internal investigations and potential disciplinary actions. The White House has referenced Trump's commitment to defending biological women in response to inquiries about the lawsuit. They also cited his dedication to restoring biological truth. The Indiana Department of Corrections has not commented on Cordellionè's transfer from protective custody. The transfer from protective custody may be related to Trump's executive order concerning the housing of federal prisoners based on biological sex. This executive order has been criticized by LGBTQ+ advocates as discriminatory. The lawsuit adds to the ongoing debate on transgender rights and prison safety. It is important to note that Cordellionè was convicted in 2001 of reckless homicide for strangling her 11-month-old stepdaughter to death. She also sued an Indiana prison chaplain in February 2024. The chaplain allegedly refused her the right to wear a hijab and rejected her identity as a transgender woman. A central legal question is whether Trump's speech can be directly linked to the alleged assaults. Establishing causation in cases involving incitement is notoriously difficult. The plaintiff must demonstrate that Trump's words were not only offensive but also directly led to the specific acts of violence. The legal standard for incitement typically requires a showing of imminent lawless action. It must be proven that Trump intended his words to incite violence and that such violence was likely to occur as a direct result. This is a high bar to clear, particularly given the temporal and spatial distance between Trump's statements and the alleged assaults. Even if causation can be established, the issue of liability remains complex. Trump's legal team will likely argue that he is protected by the First Amendment. They may also assert that he cannot be held responsible for the independent actions of third parties. This lawsuit brings to the forefront the precarious situation of transgender individuals within the prison system. Transgender inmates are disproportionately vulnerable to violence and discrimination. They often face challenges in accessing appropriate medical care and housing. The debate over transgender rights has become increasingly polarized in recent years. Trump's rhetoric on gender identity has been widely criticized as transphobic. This lawsuit provides a platform for examining the potential consequences of such rhetoric. The case also raises broader questions about prison reform and the treatment of vulnerable populations. It highlights the need for policies and practices that ensure the safety and well-being of all inmates, regardless of their gender identity. The lawsuit underscores the urgent need for comprehensive reforms to address the systemic issues that contribute to violence and discrimination within prisons. Cordellionè's claim of Eighth Amendment violations focuses on the conditions of her confinement. The Eighth Amendment prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. This includes a prison's deliberate indifference to an inmate's serious medical needs or safety. To succeed on this claim, Cordellionè must demonstrate that prison officials knew of a substantial risk of serious harm and disregarded that risk. She must show that their actions or omissions were deliberately indifferent to her safety. This requires proving more than mere negligence. A lawsuit highlights the challenges faced by transgender inmates in accessing adequate protection from violence. It raises questions about the adequacy of prison policies and procedures for addressing the specific needs of this vulnerable population. The case could potentially lead to court-ordered reforms in prison conditions and policies. A lawsuit hinges on the argument that Trump's rhetoric created a climate of hostility towards transgender individuals. Cordellionè claims that this climate emboldened her attackers and led to the assaults. This raises the question of the responsibility of public figures for the consequences of their words. While the First Amendment protects free speech, it does not protect speech that incites violence or defamation. The line between protected speech and unprotected incitement is often difficult to draw. Courts have generally been reluctant to hold public figures liable for the actions of others based solely on their speech. However, Cordellionè's lawsuit argues that Trump's rhetoric went beyond mere expression of opinion. She claims that it constituted a direct incitement to violence against transgender individuals. This argument will be closely scrutinized by the court. Cordellionè's conviction for the reckless homicide of her stepdaughter will undoubtedly be a factor in the case. The defense may attempt to use this information to undermine her credibility. They may argue that her past actions demonstrate a propensity for violence or dishonesty. However, the fact that Cordellionè committed a crime in the past does not necessarily negate her claims of being a victim of violence. The court will need to carefully weigh the evidence and assess her credibility based on the specific facts of the case. The focus should remain on whether Trump's actions contributed to the alleged assaults, regardless of Cordellionè's past. A lawsuit against the prison chaplain also adds another layer of complexity. It demonstrates a pattern of Cordellionè seeking legal redress for perceived injustices. This could be viewed either as a sign of her determination to fight for her rights or as evidence of a litigious nature. A lawsuit could have significant implications for transgender rights and prison safety. A successful outcome for Cordellionè could establish a precedent for holding public figures accountable for the consequences of their speech. It could also lead to reforms in prison policies and practices to better protect transgender inmates. However, a dismissal of the lawsuit could have the opposite effect. It could embolden those who seek to marginalize and discriminate against transgender individuals. It could also send a message that violence against transgender inmates is not taken seriously. Regardless of the outcome, the lawsuit has already raised awareness of the challenges faced by transgender individuals within the prison system. It has sparked a national conversation about the need for greater protection and respect for transgender rights. The case serves as a reminder of the ongoing struggle for equality and justice for all members of society. Cordellionè's lawsuit against Donald Trump is a complex case that intersects multiple legal and social issues. It raises questions about free speech, incitement, prison safety, transgender rights, and the responsibility of public figures. The outcome of the case will have significant implications for all of these areas. The lawsuit highlights the vulnerability of transgender individuals within the prison system and the need for comprehensive reforms to address the systemic issues that contribute to violence and discrimination. It also serves as a reminder of the importance of holding public figures accountable for the consequences of their words. The case is a stark illustration of the challenges faced by marginalized communities and the ongoing struggle for equality and justice.